My son told me, "Don't come to my graduation. You'll embarrass me." He had no idea I had spent 10 years secretly building his dream future. The moment I canceled his $1 million gift, his entire world changed. What he discovered later left him in tears. The first time my son ever held my finger, he squeezed it so tightly that the nurse laughed. Looks like he already knows who his hero is. I smiled through exhausted tears. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and in that single moment, I made a promise that no one else ever heard. No matter what happens, I'll make sure you never have to struggle the way I did. That promise would define the next 22 years of my life. It would cost me friendships, sleep, relationships, and every luxury I could have enjoyed. And in the end, my own son would look me straight in the eyes and say, "Don't come to my graduation. You'll embarrass me." My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 58 years old. People who meet me usually assume I'm just another maintenance worker. My jeans are faded. My boots are worn. My pickup truck is older than most college students. The wrinkles on my hands tell stories that expensive watches never could. Most people never look twice at someone like me. That was fine, because appearances had always been my greatest disguise. After my wife Emma died when Ethan was 12, life became very simple. Wake up at 4:30. Work. Come home. Cook dinner. Help with homework. Go back to work on weekends. Repeat. For 10 years. No vacations. No expensive restaurants. No new clothes unless the old ones completely fell apart. Every dollar I didn't absolutely need, I invested. Not for me. For Ethan. He never knew. Why would he? Children aren't supposed to carry the weight of their parents' sacrifices. When he wanted basketball shoes, he got them. When he needed a laptop, he got it. When he dreamed about studying engineering, I quietly made sure nothing would stop him. What he never saw was me eating instant noodles for weeks after paying one of his school fees. Or working overnight shifts cleaning office buildings. Or fixing neighbors' roofs every Sunday for extra money. He only saw a father who always seemed tired. As Ethan grew older, something changed. Not overnight. Little by little, the polite boy who once hugged me every morning slowly disappeared. High school brought new friends, new clothes, new ambitions, and eventually, new embarrassment. "Dad, can you park around the corner?" "Why? I don't want everyone seeing your truck." I laughed, thinking it was just teenage insecurity. So I parked around the corner. Months later, "Dad, don't wear those boots to parent night." "What's wrong with my boots? They just look old." I bought polish, spent an hour cleaning them. He still looked disappointed. By college, the distance between us had become impossible to ignore. Our phone calls lasted less than 3 minutes. He answered texts with one-word replies. "Busy. Later." "Okay. Fine." Still, every month I transferred money into an investment account. Every month, without missing one. For 10 straight years, the account grew. Stocks, real estate, business investments, compound interest worked quietly while I worked loudly. The final value shocked even my financial advisor. $1.3 million. Enough to give Ethan the future I'd always imagined. A house, freedom from debt, a chance to build the engineering company he'd dreamed about since childhood. It was going to be my graduation surprise. Only 3 people knew. Me, my lawyer, and my private banker. Everyone else thought I was just getting by. That was exactly how I wanted it. Graduation week finally arrived. I couldn't sleep. I'd bought a new navy blue suit. Not expensive, just respectable. Emma would have loved it. I stood in front of the mirror practicing. "I'm proud of you, son." Too formal. "Ethan, your mom would be so proud." Too emotional. I tried again. No words felt big enough. The graduation invitation arrived in the mail. I stared at it for almost an hour. Then framed it. People frame awards. I framed invitations. Because after everything we'd survived, we had made it, together. Or so I believed. 2 days before graduation, my phone rang. "Ethan." I answered immediately. "Hey, buddy." His voice sounded distracted. "Dad, we need to talk." "Everything okay?" "Yeah." A long silence. Then, "I think it'd be better if you didn't come." I laughed. "What?" "The graduation." Another silence. "I don't want you there." The words landed like bricks. "I don't understand. My girlfriend's parents are coming." "So, they're different." "Different how?" "They're successful." I frowned. "So am I." He sighed impatiently. "Dad, please don't make this difficult. I'm trying to understand." "They'll think." He stopped. "What?" "They'll think I come from Nothing. I couldn't breathe. You think I'm nothing? I didn't say that. What exactly are you saying? I just don't want to explain why my dad looks like. Like what? Another silence. Finally, like a janitor. The room became perfectly quiet. Not because there wasn't sound. Because my heart had stopped hearing it. I've worked as a maintenance supervisor for 28 years. I know. That job fed you. I know. It paid your tuition. I know. So why are you ashamed of it? His answer came softly. I'm trying to build connections. Connections. One word. It erased 22 years. I think it's best if you watch the livestream. Livestream. My son's graduation. The day every father dreams about. Reduced to a livestream. I already bought a suit. I'm sorry. I practiced what I was going to say. I'm sorry. I've waited for this day since you were born. I know. No. I whispered. You don't. The call ended. Not with goodbye. Just silence. For the first time since Emma died, I cried. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Alone. In the kitchen where we'd celebrated every birthday. Every report card. Every small victory. That night I opened the safe hidden behind the bookshelf. Inside sat one folder. Blue leather. Embossed in gold. For Ethan. Inside. Investment statements. Property deeds. Trust documents. Bank confirmations. Everything necessary to transfer over $1 million into Ethan's name immediately after graduation. I stared at it for a long time. The next morning I drove to my lawyer's office. He smiled. Big day tomorrow. Not anymore. His smile disappeared. What happened? I handed him the folder. I need to change the trust. He looked confused. Daniel, are you sure? I've never been more sure. You've spent 10 years building this. I know. This was your dream. I know. If you cancel the transfer now. I understand. He leaned back. What do you want instead? I looked out the window. At people rushing through life. Not realizing how quickly love can be mistaken for entitlement. Then I answered quietly. I want him to earn it. The lawyer nodded slowly, without another question, because sometimes, the saddest decisions require no explanation. That afternoon, my private banker called. I've prepared everything for tomorrow's presentation. Cancel it. A long silence. Cancel everything. Yes. The trust. Yes. The transfer. Yes. The investment account. Everything. He cleared his throat. May I ask why? My son doesn't want to be associated with the man who built it. Another silence. Then, I'm very sorry, Mr. Carter. So am I. Graduation day arrived. At exactly 10 in the morning. I didn't put on the new suit. Instead, I folded it carefully, placed it back in the closet. Still wearing my old work clothes, I sat alone in my living room and turned on the livestream. Thousands of parents cheered from the audience. I watched through a computer screen. When Ethan crossed the stage, he smiled. He looked happy. He had no idea that at that exact moment, the $1 million future waiting for him had quietly disappeared. And before the day was over, a single phone call would begin revealing a truth that would change both of their lives forever. The applause echoed through the livestream as Ethan shook the dean's hand. I smiled anyway. No matter what had happened, he was still my son. No father stops loving his child because of one painful sentence. But love and trust are not always the same thing. When the ceremony ended, I quietly closed my laptop. The house felt unusually silent. Emma's photograph sat on the mantel above the fireplace. I picked it up. You would have been so proud of him, I whispered. Then my voice cracked. I just wish he had been proud of me. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. For a brief second, hope returned. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe he'd realized what he'd done. I answered immediately. Congratulations, son. Dad, thanks. There was excitement in his voice. So, where are you? At home. Oh, another pause. I thought maybe you'd come anyway. I respect people's wishes. He laughed awkwardly. Well, tonight we're having dinner with Claire's family. I hope you have a wonderful evening. You too. He hung up. Not once did he ask why I sounded so different. That evening, I reheated leftover soup. It was the same kind Emma used to make. Simple, warm, comforting. Across town, Ethan was eating in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. His girlfriend Claire came from wealth. Her father owned several construction companies. Her mother served on charity boards. Everything about their world looked polished. Expensive watches, luxury cars, designer suits, exactly the kind of people Ethan wanted to impress. Halfway through dinner, Claire's father smiled. So, Ethan, your father couldn't make it. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't feeling well. Claire reached under the table and squeezed his hand. No one questioned the answer. But across the table sat an older gentleman named Richard Wallace. He had spent 40 years in finance. He noticed everything. What's your father do? Richard asked. Ethan forced a smile. Maintenance. Richard nodded respectfully. Hard work. Ethan shrugged. Yeah. Richard looked disappointed by the lack of appreciation in Ethan's voice. Back at home, I received another phone call. This time it was my banker. Mr. Carter, the cancellation has been processed. I understand. The trust no longer transfers automatically. Good. There's one more thing. What is it? The account continues to grow. I know. Would you like us to create another beneficiary? I looked at Emma's photograph again. No. Then what should we do? For now, leave it exactly where it is. The next morning, Ethan drove to my house. I wasn't expecting him. He knocked twice before opening the screen door. Dad, in the garage. He walked inside and stopped. I was rebuilding an old wooden workbench. You always work, he joked. It keeps my hands busy. He noticed the unopened graduation cake sitting on the table. You didn't celebrate. I celebrated quietly. He looked uncomfortable. I brought you something. He handed me his graduation program. I smiled. Thank you. Then he noticed the new navy blue suit hanging near the garage door. Still covered in plastic. You bought a suit? Yes. For what? I looked directly at him. For your graduation. His face turned pale. He suddenly understood. I'd planned to be there. Not just attend. Celebrate. Take pictures. Stand beside him, like every proud father. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know. You made your choice. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally he asked, can we move past this? I smiled sadly. Someday. He left shortly afterward. Neither of us mentioned the blue folder hidden in my office. Neither of us mentioned the gift. 2 weeks later, Ethan called again. Dad, you sound excited. I got an offer. That's wonderful. A huge engineering firm. I knew you could do it. They're starting me at $95,000 a year. I laughed. Your mother would be bragging to every neighbor. He laughed too. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. Then he said, I've been looking at houses. So soon? Claire's parents think it's the right investment. Do you have enough saved? He hesitated. Not really. I remained silent. He seemed to expect me to say something. I didn't. Dad, yes, I kind of thought. What? I don't know. Another pause. Nothing. That conversation stayed with him. Because for the first time in his life, whenever he hinted that he needed help, I didn't rescue him. Over the next several months, reality arrived. Student loans, car payments, rent, insurance, taxes, everything added up faster than he expected. His impressive salary suddenly didn't seem so impressive. Meanwhile, the investment account continued growing. 1.3 million became 1.4. Then 1.5. Money works patiently. People rarely do. One rainy afternoon, my lawyer invited me to lunch. You've been thinking about him. Every day. You could still give him everything. I could. So why haven't you? I stirred my coffee. Because gifts only have value when they're appreciated. And if he never changes. I smiled sadly. Then the money will help someone else. Across town, Ethan attended a company networking event. One executive asked, so, Ethan, what inspired you to become an engineer? He smiled. My dad. What does he do? Maintenance. The executive nodded. That's honest work. It is. You sound proud. For the first time, Ethan answered without hesitation. I am. The word surprised even him. That night he drove past my neighborhood. He didn't stop, but he slowed down, looking at the small house he'd spent his childhood in. He remembered things he'd forgotten. The nights I stayed awake helping with science projects. The weekends fixing his bicycle. The mornings making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The sacrifices he never noticed because children aren't supposed to notice them. He parked nearby, sat in silence, then quietly whispered, what happened to me? The next morning, someone knocked on my front door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there holding a small photo album. I found this in Mom's closet. Inside were dozens of old pictures. Me working construction, me coaching Little League, me sleeping in a hospital chair after Emma's chemotherapy, me standing outside Ethan's middle school in dirty work clothes. Still smiling. Every page told a story he'd forgotten. By the final page, his eyes were full of tears. Dad, I know. No, he whispered. I don't think you do. He looked at the photographs again. I spent so much time being embarrassed by what people saw, that I forgot to see what you actually did for me. I didn't answer, because sometimes silence says more than forgiveness ever can. As father and son sat together in that quiet living room, neither of them realized that a phone call from Daniel's lawyer, about a secret investment account now worth more than $1.5 million, was only days away. And when Ethan finally learned what his father had been planning to give him on graduation day, his entire understanding of love, sacrifice, and success would be shattered. 3 days after Ethan visited my house with the old photo album, my phone rang just after breakfast. It was my lawyer, Michael. "Daniel, are you free this afternoon?" "I am. I think it's time we reviewed your estate plan." "I thought we already did." "We did, but something has changed." "What?" "The investment portfolio crossed another milestone this morning." I smiled faintly. "How much?" There was a pause. $1,583,000. For a moment, I simply stared out the kitchen window. The number hardly mattered anymore. 10 years earlier, every extra dollar had represented another hour of work, another skipped meal, another weekend spent fixing roofs instead of resting. Now the account had become something much larger than money. It had become the physical proof of a father's promise. That afternoon, I met Michael at his office. He placed the thick blue folder on the desk. It still had Ethan's name embossed in gold. He looked at me carefully. "Are you certain you don't want to restore the original trust?" I ran my hand over the cover. "I've thought about it every day. And I don't want to reward entitlement." Michael nodded. "So what do you want?" I answered quietly. "I want him to understand why the gift existed before he ever receives it." Across town, Ethan was having one of the worst weeks of his life. His company had delayed a major project. Bonuses were frozen. Claire had started talking about buying a larger home, but every mortgage calculator told the same story. They couldn't afford it, not yet. The future he imagined wasn't arriving nearly as fast as he'd expected. That evening Claire asked gently, "Have you talked to your dad lately?" "A little. You still seem distant." I heard him. "You can fix that." "I don't know if I can." The following Saturday, Ethan came over unexpectedly. This time he brought groceries. "You always forget to buy fruit," he said with an awkward smile. "I've survived this long." "I know." We spent the afternoon repairing the old fence behind the house. For hours, we worked without discussing the past. Sometimes healing begins with shared silence rather than perfect words. As we packed up the tools, Ethan stopped. "Dad." "Yes, I've been remembering things." "Like what?" "The bicycle." I laughed. "You crashed it into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox." I blamed the mailbox. "You absolutely did." We both laughed. For the first time in years, it felt natural. Then his smile faded. "I don't remember ever saying thank you." "You were 8. I mean, for everything." I looked at him. "You don't owe me anything for raising you." He lowered his head. "I think I do." That night, Michael called again. "I need your signature on one final document." "I'll stop by Monday. It concerns the cancelled graduation transfer." "All right." Unfortunately, someone else overheard that conversation. Monday morning, Ethan arrived at my house just as I was leaving. Heading somewhere. My lawyer's office. For what? Just paperwork. He offered to drive me. Halfway there, my phone rang through the car speakers. Michael didn't realize Ethan was listening. "Daniel, I have the cancelled graduation trust ready. We also updated the $1.58 million account exactly as requested." The car became completely silent. Michael kept talking. "The original transfer to Ethan remains cancelled unless you choose otherwise." I quickly ended the call. Neither of us spoke. Ethan slowly pulled the car to the side of the road. He looked at me as though he had forgotten how to breathe. $1.58 million. I closed my eyes. There was no reason to hide it anymore. Yes, for me, it was. His voice trembled. "What do you mean, was?" "It was supposed to become yours on graduation day." His hands began shaking. "I don't understand." I looked out the window. "I spent 10 years building your future." His face turned white. "The graduation gift." I nodded. You were going to give me over $1 million." "It wasn't about the money." "Then why?" "Because your mother and I dreamed that you would begin adult life without the struggles we had." He stared at me. "And I finished the sentence for him. Ask the man who built that future not to attend the moment it was meant to begin." Tears filled his eyes. "Oh my God." He covered his face with both hands. "Oh my God." For nearly 5 minutes, neither of us moved. Finally, Ethan whispered, I thought you were barely getting by. I wanted you to believe that success isn't something you show off. You worked all those extra hours. For you, the weekends. For you, the old truck, so the investment account could grow. The worn-out boots, I didn't need new ones. Every answer broke him a little more. I'm so sorry, I know you are. No, Dad, his voice cracked, I judged you by your clothes. You did, I cared more about what strangers thought than what you had sacrificed. You were young, that's not an excuse. No, it isn't. He cried harder than I had ever seen. Not as a child, not at his mother's funeral. Not when he graduated. This was different. This was the weight of realizing that the greatest gift of his life had disappeared because of his own pride. A week later, Ethan invited me to dinner. Not at an expensive restaurant. At his apartment. He cooked everything himself. The chicken was overcooked. The potatoes were under-seasoned. It was one of the best meals I'd ever eaten. Halfway through dinner, he stood up. I have something to say. Claire smiled encouragingly. He looked directly at me. I spent years believing success was measured by appearances. His eyes filled again. I was wrong. He reached into a drawer and handed me a framed photograph. It was an old picture of us covered in grease while fixing his first bicycle. Across the bottom, engraved in small silver letters, were the words, "The man who built my future before I could see it." I couldn't speak. Neither could he. Claire quietly wiped away a tear. For the first time since Emma died, the emptiness inside the room felt just a little smaller. For weeks after learning the truth about the cancelled graduation gift, Ethan barely recognized himself. Every memory looked different now. The old pickup truck wasn't a sign of failure. It was an investment in his future. The worn work boots weren't embarrassing. They were the reason he had graduated debt-free. Every overtime shift, every missed vacation, every patched-up pair of jeans, had quietly become another brick in the life his father was building for him. One Saturday morning, Ethan knocked on my front door carrying a cardboard box. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled nervously. Everything I thought mattered. Inside were designer watches, expensive sneakers, luxury sunglasses, and a few gadgets that had cost far more than they were worth. "I sold my sports car yesterday," he said. I looked at him in surprise. "You loved that car." I loved what I thought it said about me. And now I want my life to say something better. Over the next few months, Ethan began spending nearly every weekend with me. Sometimes we worked in the garden. Sometimes we repaired things around the house. Sometimes we simply sat on the porch with coffee and talked about life. For the first time in years, we weren't trying to impress each other. We were simply father and son again. Claire noticed the change immediately. "You smile differently now," she told him one evening. "I finally know what success looks like." "And what does it look like?" He answered without hesitation. "A man who gave everything without asking for applause." One afternoon, Ethan asked a question he had been avoiding. "Dad, what happened to the money?" I smiled. "It's safe. You still have it." "Yes, you could have spent it." "I never built it for myself." He lowered his eyes. "I don't deserve it." "No," I replied honestly. "You didn't." His shoulders slumped. Then I continued. "But people can change." A few days later, I invited Ethan and Claire to my lawyer's office. Michael greeted us warmly. The same blue leather folder rested on the conference table. Ethan recognized it immediately. His eyes filled with emotion. "That's the folder prepared for your graduation," Michael said. Ethan reached toward it but stopped. "I don't want to open it unless Dad wants me to." That single sentence told me more than any apology ever could. I nodded. "Go ahead." He opened the folder slowly. Inside were the original investment statements, property deeds, and trust documents. Behind them was a handwritten letter. It was dated exactly 10 years earlier. The day I had opened the investment account. Michael quietly left the room so we could be alone. Ethan unfolded the letter. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, you've become the man your mother always believed you could be. This money isn't a reward for getting good grades or earning a degree. It's a reminder that love is often invisible while it's being given. Every dollar in this account represents a choice. A weekend I worked instead of resting. A vacation I didn't take. A new truck I never bought. A dream I postponed so yours could come first. If you ever forget where you came from, then this money will only make you poorer. But if you remember the value of kindness, humility, and family, then it will become a blessing. Whatever happens, never be ashamed of honest work. Love, Dad." By the time he reached the last line, Tears were falling onto the paper. He couldn't stop crying. He stood up and wrapped his arms around me. I'm so sorry. I know. No. He shook his head. I don't just mean for graduation. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry for every moment I made you feel small. I hugged him tightly. You can't change yesterday, but you can change tomorrow. Michael returned to the room carrying one final document. This, he said, is the updated trust. Ethan looked confused. I thought it was cancelled. It was, I answered. I created a new one. He stared at me. Why? Because the son who asked me not to attend graduation isn't sitting in this room anymore. The new trust contained different conditions. Half of the money would help Ethan and Claire buy their first home. The other half would remain invested. Each year, a portion would fund scholarships for students whose parents worked in blue-collar jobs: janitors, mechanics, construction workers, cleaners, factory employees, truck drivers, and maintenance staff. Ethan looked up in surprise. Scholarships? I nodded. There are thousands of children who grow up believing their parents' work isn't important. He smiled through tears. Let's show them they're wrong. Over the next year, the Carter Family Scholarship was established. At the first award ceremony, dozens of families gathered in a community auditorium. Among them were mechanics still wearing work uniforms, custodians finishing night shifts, electricians, plumbers, and warehouse workers. Many apologized for arriving in work clothes. Ethan welcomed every one of them personally. He shook their hands. He thanked them, and he told each student, if anyone ever makes you feel embarrassed by your parents' honest work, remember this. He glanced toward me in the front row. The strongest foundations are almost always built by hands people overlook. When the audience stood and applauded, Ethan walked off the stage. Instead of accepting the praise himself, he came directly to me. Dad, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Would you stand with me? I hesitated. He smiled. This recognition belongs to you. For a brief moment, I remembered the graduation ceremony I had watched through a computer screen. The one I had missed. Then I stood. The audience rose again. This time, I wasn't watching from home. I was standing beside my son. Proud, not because of the money, not because of the scholarship, but because character had finally become more important to him than appearances. As we left the stage, Ethan quietly whispered, I have one more thing to say. What is it? He smiled. If I ever have children. I looked at him. They'll know exactly who their grandfather is. I laughed softly. And who is that? He squeezed my shoulder. The man who secretly spent 10 years building my future, and taught me that the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's love. The evening sun stretched long shadows across the auditorium steps as we walked outside together. For the first time in many years, neither of us walked ahead. Neither of us walked behind. We walked side by side. The rain had just begun when Ethan parked outside my house. He sat in his car for almost 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel. The blue folder was resting on the passenger seat, not because it belonged to him, because he still couldn't believe it had ever been meant for him. He finally stepped out and walked toward the front porch. I was sitting in my old rocking chair with a cup of coffee, watching the rain fall across the front yard. When I looked up and saw him, I smiled. Morning. He nodded quietly. Morning, Dad. He held the blue folder against his chest like something too precious to let go. I've read your letter at least 50 times. I smiled softly. I only hoped you'd read it once. His eyes filled with tears. Every time I read it, I find another sacrifice I never noticed. He sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence. Finally, Ethan broke it. Dad, yes, if Mom could see us today, what do you think she'd say? I looked toward the cloudy sky. I think she'd tell us we wasted enough time. Ethan laughed through his tears. I think you're right. Over the next few months, our relationship slowly healed. There were no dramatic speeches. No overnight miracles. Just small moments. Saturday breakfasts. Fishing trips. Fixing the old fence together. Watching baseball games from the same worn-out couch. Little by little, we became father and son again. One afternoon Ethan surprised me by arriving in my old pickup truck. I frowned. What happened to your car? I sold it. You loved that car. I loved the attention it gave me. He smiled. I'd rather drive something that reminds me where I came from. 6 months later, Michael called us both to his office. I have everything ready. Ethan looked confused. I thought, the trust was cancelled. It was, Michael replied. Today you're looking at a different trust. He handed Ethan a new folder. Inside was a document with one sentence highlighted. The beneficiary shall receive the estate when the grantor is satisfied that character has become more valuable than wealth. Ethan looked at me. You changed the conditions. I did. Have I earned it? I smiled. You're asking the wrong question. He looked puzzled. The right question is, what kind of man will you become after receiving it? Michael slid one final page across the table. The investment account had grown again. Balance: $1,742,860. Ethan stared at the number in disbelief. I don't need all of this. I know. I've already built my own career. I know. So why give it to me? I leaned forward. Because this money was never about making you rich. It was about giving you freedom. We spent the next hour making a new plan. Half the money would help Ethan and Claire buy a modest home. Not a mansion, a home. The remaining balance would create a scholarship in Emma's name for students whose parents worked honest blue-collar jobs. When Ethan signed the documents, he looked at me. I promise you, this money will never change who I am again. A year later, the first Emma Carter Memorial Scholarship was awarded. The auditorium was filled with students and parents. Mechanics, janitors, truck drivers, factory workers, construction crews, people who had spent their lives working with their hands. Many apologized for arriving in uniforms. Ethan shook every hand. You never have to apologize for honest work, he said. Then he stepped to the microphone. When I graduated, I made the biggest mistake of my life. The room became silent. I was embarrassed by the man who sacrificed everything for me. He looked toward the front row where I was sitting. I thought success was wearing expensive clothes. I thought wealth meant luxury. I was wrong. He pointed toward me. The richest man I've ever known is my father. The audience turned toward me. I wanted to disappear. Instead, they stood, one by one. The applause grew louder. Parents wiped away tears. Students smiled. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not because of money, not because of the scholarship, but because my son finally understood the value of love that expects nothing in return. After the ceremony, Ethan walked over and hugged me. I'm proud to call you my father. I smiled. I'm proud to call you my son. As we walked out together, I remembered the graduation day I had watched alone on a laptop. Life had given us another stage, another audience, another chance. This time, neither of us missed it.